Hi, I'm Pat Carberry, the director of the Chan Center for the Performing Arts and the UBC School of Music. I want to begin by acknowledging that we are hosting this discussion on the traditional, ancestral, unceded lands of the Musqueam people, and that many of the people who are going to join us to watch and participate in this will be coming from other Indigenous lands. I also want to recognize that today we're recording on September 30th is Orange Shirt Day, a time when we recognize the victims and the survivors of the residential school system. So I'm really pleased that we have this opportunity to speak and engage with Jeremy Dutcher, who gave us such an amazing concert on our Chan.com series, and that we have an opportunity for some of our students to ask questions. So the students are from a course that David Metzer and I are leading called Beyond Hungry Listening, the Score and Decolonization. So we have a bunch of the students lined up, and I'm going to turn it over to them to ask the questions.
Hi, so I guess I'm starting off the questions portion of this. My name is Joseph.
Hi, Joseph.
Hi, it's so great to be here and have the chance to hear your perspective on things. So thanks so much for doing this.
Honestly, this is the most people I've talked to in like months and months and months. So I'm over the moon about it. This is so exciting. And we get to talk about music. Amazing.
Great.
So go ahead, Joseph.
Well, I just wanted to say that I'm a piano student, a master's student in piano at UBC, an uninvited guest, of course, on Musqueam territory. And so my question to you is, what specific changes, would you like to see in the conservatories and universities' music programs that ensure that these educational systems so deeply rooted in Western classical tradition are not actually contributing to the silencing and ignoring of BIPOC voices?
I mean, that's a great question. Thank you for bringing that forward. I think, you know, there's so many layers to that answer. It's like it's an institutional answer. It's like a community-based answer. It's like, okay, so I'm gonna try to sort of tackle it in a couple of ways, because I think it's a really broad and great question, because I think we are in this moment of reckoning right now where we're like these institutions that have just not really and in different ways, but I think are now in a new way having to really consider how they're speaking with communities that they're around, you know, because these institutions are not devoid of a location, of course, right? And I think the more we acknowledge that, like we have done up front, talking very strongly about like the Musqueam, you know, presence on that land, and you know, I'm gathered here in Haudenosaunee territory, so it's like for you know, in all of us, I think there's a moment where we can just recognize that that lineage that has been caretaking for the places that we gather, and that is one starting place. Of course, I think the ways in which we program our concerts and our, you know, and our seasons, and who gets to be around that decision table, I think is important as well. In terms of, but yeah, I think it also always just falls on individuals for us to create space in our own hearts to be open up to like other, like really different perspectives, like fundamentally, because I think what we need to, hopefully we can come to understand when we get to know each other a little better as Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, is that our languages, because they're rooted in such different worldviews and such different, they have different precepts, you know, they have different starting places, that we don't come to the same conclusions often because we're not starting from the same intellectual places. So I think the more that we can invite that kind of like linguistic diversity, but also thought diversity within terms of how Indigenous people would structure these institutions, because really, I hope that we can go no less than structural change, you know? That we can really, I think we have a moment right now to really fundamentally change institutions to include voices that have not really been in the door much, you know? My mother's generation was the first to even go to university. You know, and she went from the going to the day school system to that, you know, and so it's like just within that one generation, we see this like amazing leap in terms of educational attainment, and now we have a whole generation of young people that were not steeped in the kind of direct traumas of colonization. And I should say that it is, of course, ongoing, but I will say that, like, you know, residential schools are closed now. You know, it's like we are not, the boot is maybe not on our neck as much as my mother's generation. So I think that has allowed us to flourish and come forward in a new way. And so we have this whole young cohort of indigenous people that like know our languages and know our songs and like are now entering these institutions and finding them really constrictive. Like I found that myself, you know, when I studied, you know, I'll just say it. I studied at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and took their music program. And I found it really constrictive in terms of like the kinds of repertoire that were available for musicians to sing. And I really had to like push the bounds of like what I was able to do. Because I didn't see myself reflected in the canon of what, you know, was appropriate for a young singer to sing. So I think, and to be honest, that kind of limitation is exactly what led me to create my first work. And so, of course, I'm so grateful for that as well, because I wasn't able to express my completeness in that institution. And so I had to sort of like work around it to create something that I wanted to see. You know, Buffy Sainte-Marie, who I'm like, I guess at this point, a disciple of, I feel like I just talk about her all day. But she has a really beautiful like way of thinking about this and thinking of this. And she says, you know, when what you want is not on the menu, go into the kitchen, cook it up, and show them how good it tastes. You know, and I think that for me is like a real guiding philosophy around how we are to do. You know, I think of course we need to point out the injustices when we see them, but I think we are called as creative beings to create something in response, you know, and I think, and limitations do that. And I think institutions do that because they create limitations around our artistic expression. And I think in a way that's good, in a way that is, if you can survive it, it's really beautiful because you can create within it, around it. Is that making? I don't know. I have a tendency to ramble as well, and so you just like we should have a structure where you can just put your hand up at any time just to stop my rambling, and I will totally rein it in. I'm sorry. Did that cover your question a little bit? Is there any follow-up question to that question?
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you, Joseph.
Hi, Jeremy.
Hi.
I'm Karen Nee.
Karen Nee, okay. Pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Thank you so much. I'm studying at UBC in choral conducting. So I have a love of song as well, so it's great. My question today is centering on your use of traditional stories and songs in your latest album, especially the recordings of Jim Paul. And I'd love to hear you speak a little bit more about how those stories and that traditional music influenced your musical choices on the album.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm happy to answer that. Thank you for that question. Yeah, so for me, the archive was really the centerpiece to what I wanted to say with that first record. So I come from the Wolastoqiyik, who is a group of indigenous folks in the East. And there's an elder she's actually from a neighboring nation of ours called the Passamaquoddy, or the Beskodemoquoddy. And so her name is Maggie Paul. And so she's the one who kind of set me on the trail to learn more about these archival songs and and so she said, because she knew I was really interested in like our traditional music, and she said, well, you really want to know the tradition, like you want to know the old stuff, you know, you got to go to the museum. And so I did, and so I spent some time at that National Archive, and then yeah, sitting with that material just kind of changed my life, I guess, you know, because there was just unending, unfurling beauty that came from every track of it, and I felt kind of foolish in a way because it was like really scratchy, and it felt like you uncovered something that you thought was like the most precious thing in the world, and that nobody else might find it beautiful, you know, because it was like it was kind of hard to listen to at times, you know, really like those really old wax cylinders, right? Like the stuff that the ones that appeared on the album are really cleaned up in terms of like we did some auditory magic to get those into a way that kind of sounded like the voice was there, you know. But a lot of them, without being cleaned up, are really like grindy and kind of dirty. Which I love too. I think for me, that's like I could just release a whole album of that, and I would be like, I would stand by that for sure. But you know, there was just so much beauty in there, and I really felt like, or I guess a responsibility to go in to share that with people, because like just like those songs, like people didn't sing them anymore. Like they just weren't. They weren't. With the exception of one of them that had survived, a lot of them just weren't sung anymore. And so I think for me, it was just about trying to be a mirror and shine what I had seen out into my community. And, you know, there's and it became like a very much a directed project. Like I had this phrase that I kept going back to all the time, which is, it's a lyric actually from one of our traditional songs, and it says, "So all my people, this is for you." And I love this. I love this idea because it really focused what I want, like who it was for, which was for, you know, Wolastoqiyik, for Skidinawag, and that really influenced the language that I use. You know, I really wanted to ensure that it was like all Wolastoqiyik, and like for the first record that I wanted to put in the world, I wanted it to be like really directed to my people, you know. And of course, you know, lots of people came around that fire and wanted to watch and listen, and I'm so happy they did. And of course, I want to share more. But yeah, I'm so grateful to that time in the archives, and it really set me on a path of just trying to stoke a flame of that has been low for a long time. And I think you know, because I think it's also important to recognize that it's not just my nation's archive, and it's not just songs, right? Like it's also, we're talking about like stories and photographs and like material things like cradle boards and like objects and drums and lots of stuff in there, you know. And so I think for me, we're in a time now where that stuff is kind of magic, and it all needs to come out of those institutions. And I know that's kind of a controversial statement, but I think the more that we talk about this, I think it's undeniable that we would like our stuff back. And the more that you tell people about this issue, the more that you talk to different communities about like, hey, you know, they have this and this and this, and like, here's this collection. And they're like, oh yeah, no, we should look into that. You know, people are, you know, we introduced that idea of rematriation or repatriation into people. And I think we know where that belongs. You know, it feels right when it's home with us. And I must say there's been lots of people within those, you know, we were talking about institutions in our last question, and I think, you know, lots of people within institutions that that do that good work and make those connections with communities that aren't necessarily the institution. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's good people within it that are doing really, really great work to make sure that we're increasing access all the time to the people that need it. Because I think, you know, just for like my and again, I want to be cognizant of time. I don't want to ramble on too long. But in my specific context, with our language, we have less than 100 fluent speakers left. And I know, I know out west too, it's a very, there's a lot of languages out there that are really in a critical way, And so, I think there's an urgency to that work in getting our stories out. And I think there's an importance to narrative sovereignty as part of that, and making sure that we are able to tell our own stories that have been kept from us in those institutional ways. So I think, for me, like putting the voice of our ancestor right up against my own and the sort of contemporary interpretation of these songs, I think was a very intentional sort of conversation, I guess, that I was trying to front load in that, to say that nothing ever died, and it never went anywhere. It just went away for safekeeping for a little while, and it's all gonna come out now in the time when it has to, right? Because we see that we're at this really big turning point right now, in a ecological way, in I guess a political way, in a social way, in the ways that we value the feminine in our society. And I think Indigenous worldview has a lot of the antidote. Is that antidote? the thing that will help it, and so I think the more that we can, and that's why I'm so happy that this album didn't just connect with my people. It went out and connected with lots of people outside of our community that I guess were able to see their own sort of resiliency in it, I guess. I don't know if that makes any sense. Do you have any follow-up questions to what I said?
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. And I love the idea of the language being shared with so many people. It's fabulous.
Oh my gosh. It's one of the most exciting things about it to me is that, with this musical project, I was able to put that conversation of linguistic revitalization among my nation, but also, a lot of Indigenous nations, right to the forefront. And for me, that is getting to go around and to meet young people that said, when I heard your album, I wanted to go and learn my language too. And I thought, oh gosh, that's it. That is exactly why I do it. Anyway,
well, thank you very much.
Okay, take care. Thank you for your question.
I'm a composer, also studying at UBC.
Cool.
And kind of coming from the composer's background, something that really kind of struck me on listening to this album is how many different styles and genres from both the classical side and the popular side, if you want to draw a line down the middle, are kind of combined. And I'm curious, partly what led you to these particular styles, but maybe more so, in what ways do these musical languages affect the way you interpret and present the songs?
Mm-hmm. That's a wonderful question. Thank you for bringing that forward. I mean, just to pick up on what you said, no, I wouldn't want to draw a line down it. I don't believe in lines. I think it's I think genre is a bit of a phony construction. It's I think we are, all of us are sound makers, and I think we express that in many different ways. Even we're doing it right now. I think. This is a really good question. I don't want to miss any of it. I think that what I say sometimes is that I just make music at the sort of musical intersection that I inhabit, which is my mother's Indigenous, and really made sure that we knew our songs and our culture and our language, and really played us, Indigenous music when we were growing up. And so it just became a fabric of my life, And then my father is non-Indigenous, a lover of classical music. And, and so I kind of met at those two spaces. And then, just being a a weirdo contemporary kid putting lots of buzzy sounds and weird things on that record was just fun to me. I think like yeah, from a genre standpoint, it was kind of funny that you said that it was like you really noticed like a broad range, I guess, because I remember one specific point in my creation process. Like I had done all the research and like the compositions were like all kind of getting there. I like demoed them out a little bit. And I just remember like kind of having a bit of a meltdown and like listening to them and being like, they all sound the same. I just had this like great terror of like, there's one original idea in this whole album, and like I did it like 8 times. It's like, and so maybe that was like I corrected course maybe a little, and so I was just like, here, do a little, take from Stravinsky, take from like, my elders, and like I don't know, it was like it was kind of a mishmash. But I think like. To be honest, I think that is also a reflection of my listening habits too, and probably I think most people's listening habits, which is to say that like I think we are all multiplicitous beings when it comes to how we enjoy sound, and so I think it probably didn't make me super like commercial or like I will say I was surprised that I'd sold records. Just because with I did not construct it as like I made music that I wanted to like groove to, but like not in a way of like oh, people are really gonna love this sound. It's like that really wasn't on my radar, and so yeah, it's kind of just this weird little baby that is kind of a little bit of everything. Like it's a little bit. I kind of wanted to talk to Karoni, or no, Karoni? Oh, Karoni, about the choral piece at the end of it, or like the the looped vocal part. So there's like a little bit of that. There's a little bit of like ballad stuff, and yeah, I don't know. I just it kept it interesting for me. I don't know. Did that answer your question? I want to make sure that
that answer. I guess one other thing, if you want to get into this level of detail, is
of course, always.
Just the ways in which the predominantly kind of tonal languages of both pop and classical influenced. I know it influenced the way I heard the original Jim Paul recordings. Right. I just was curious on what your perspective was in creating that.
Oh my God, yeah, the tonality of those recordings. Yeah, I mean, it's really not falling within a super like tonal structure of like 12-tone situation. It's like it's really its own language of like microtonalities and like in between notes, and we're sliding here and we're doing this, and it's like there's a lot of unlearning that I think I had to do from my days at school of like really trying to like get the theory in there, and then realizing as I started this project that like, oh, that's only one musical language. And actually there's a whole, and I've been, and I think this really goes to, if we really want to get into it, it goes to like, this aspirational sense of like, well, I think like Western art music like is putting itself on a pedestal, and so we believe it too, and so there's this aspirational sense of like, oh yeah, I really want to become excellent at music, and so I'm going to study in this way, and then I think you get kind of you put you just get is that okay yeah like what is that called and then you kind of lose sight of the other like incredible like music that actually sounds right to your body. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like the sounds that resonate within you that like are generational and that are like I guess my father's family comes from Europe, but like for me it's also the mother and like what that carries and passes on, and for me that is the drum and that is the sound of like those songs, and so right, going back to tonality, for me it was like, because when I go back and listen to my vocal performance on that record, I'm like, I am not I would sing it completely differently now. I am not like worried about my tone, but I think I was having the struggle right at that time of recording my voice. Was like, okay, like I studied as an opera singer, and I wasn't a composition person or a pianist, or no, I studied as an opera singer, and but I wanted to honor the way in which these recordings brought the voice forward of my ancestors as well, which was in a playful way, was in a raw way, was in a breath filled, like hearty way, and I think I had to find a balance in how I voiced my own situation. And I'd probably do it differently, if I recorded the same thing tomorrow. And that's the beautiful thing about music. Like, what is a song? What is a recording? What is it's just a snapshot of a musical moment. And yeah, I don't know. I think I'm rambling. So
No, that's great. Thanks.
thank you for your question. It was nice to talk to you, Walker.
Nice to talk to you as well.
Take care.
Hello, Jeremy.
Hi. Who am I talking to? Sorry, you're not coming up quite yet. Oh, there you are.
Well, I'm Echo.
Hi, Echo.
I'm a master's student in musicology here at UBC, and my question has to do with Two-Spirited. So you publicly talked about your identity, your activism, and experiences with it. You've positioned it as something magical and something cross-culturally accessible. I was wondering if you could talk more about how you see Two-Spirited manifesting in your music.
Ooh, wow. That is a great question. Thank you, Echo. I don't know. For me, it's like, it's kind of a hard thing to translate or to talk about in English. Because, this is kind of what I was talking about earlier with, like, we're starting from, because our languages are so different, we start from very different presets of what gender is even, right? And so you think about like the French language or Italian or even like English language, we gender things, right? And so Wolastoq language doesn't exist in that system. So we don't talk about things as gender or people. And so everyone is sort of they, right? And so, we're sort of patting ourselves on the shoulders for like, oh, we do so well with our gender neutral pronouns. It's like, yeah. We've been doing it for a while. It's fine. Generations. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting off track. Like really off track. I'm sorry. Oh, right, Two-Spirit. So musically, it almost was. Okay, I won't say that. It wasn't divorced from the whole thing. Of course, I am the creative force that put it out, and I am who I am, and so that is what it is. I will say, I don't think in creating this sonic thing, I consciously brought that kind or that narrative into it. I think I was telling a different story, particularly around like language and ancestor and archive. But trust me, there's work to come that will definitely tackle all of that. But I also think too, like it's really sorry. I hate to start it on a downer note of like I can't really talk about that because it's like hard in English. But I just think like even the ways in which we think about gender in English or we think about sexuality or spirituality is so bankrupt. I'm sorry if that's a strong language, but I just think there is, even to try to describe the complexities of the gender universe that is within Indigenous worldviews, it falls a little short, I find. And so, I think I just want to start singing about it rather than trying to talk about it because I often find words really fall short for me to. So I'm going to be like in upcoming work on. I'm working on a record right now, and it's going to be really it's called Medel Wonok. It's the title of the work, and that is meaning the people of great spiritual power, which is the word that we use to talk about two-spirit people or queer people. And so, I think the more I get to talk about it, it really makes it clear to me that like it's kind of that worldview and that shift of viewing queer people as value positive, you know, not having to come out, like there's no closets in a teepee, you know. I think that is the transformation that is a part of a larger transformation that we're going through as a society. And I think, I think Indigenous communities have been really quick to unlearn what has been forced on us with our ideas about gender and about homophobia and transphobia and all these things. And I think, so we have this whole generation of young people that are really taking the charge and really centering, and you see this with the Black Lives Matter movement as well, which are really centering like trans voices and queer voices at the in those movements. And I think that there's a wisdom in that I think is not quite yet fully unveiled itself. You know what I'm saying? Wow, really off it. Okay, so we were talking about Two-Spirit, how it is in the music, right? Okay, so for me, so I didn't necessarily consider how am I putting Two-Spirit identity into this work? But what I will say is within the imagery that I wanted to put out around it, and within the what I wore, my sort of visual representation, that was a very central piece of it. Because for example, I did a performance at the Polaris Awards in 2018, and then at the Juno Awards in 2019. And so at both of those, I sort of I worked with this designer in Toronto named Zoff, and Zoff created me these two beautiful gowns, one of them floral and the other one black. And those for me, and not much else underneath, I should add. And those for me were opportunities to show that it is more than just about language or music or cultural revitalization, that it is, in the space that I take up, because there have been so few of us in the public light, we can maybe name, 5 or 6 on our hands, but, in terms of the kinds of Indigenous representation that have been out there for mainstream Canadians, it's there hasn't been many. And so as a queer one, I feel like a responsibility, or I want to hold that space in a way that showcases and represents something, which is to say that we are powerful people. Queer people are powerful people, and we have and the sooner that we start to sort of wipe the disease of homophobia off of us, it never should have been there, because it never should have been there. The sooner there, the better. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I hope that the more that more and more chances that I get to put representations out in the world, the more that I can create space for queer bodies, Indigenous bodies, different kinds of bodies, Black bodies, disabled bodies. I just think more room in the conversation for everyone. We just need it. It's time. Okay, I think that. Do you have any follow-up questions, or does that kind of get at what you were asking?
No follow-up, but thank you so much for your work, and I'm excited to see what comes next for you.
Okay, see you, Echo. Bye.
Before I ask my question, I'd just like to quickly acknowledge that I am currently an uninvited guest on Katsi and Kwantlen land as I ask this question. So I am a doctoral student in violin at UBC, and in previous interviews you've mentioned wanting to, and I quote, keep music a communal thing, but yet still within a framework of presenting works. So I'm curious how you see recording your albums tying into this idea, how you go about making an album both communal and performative.
Cool. That's a cool question. Thank you for that. I appreciate that, Connor. Whoa, yeah. Let me let me think about that one, because I think there is a dance that needs to be danced between them. I often just say stuff and I don't remember the quote. I think, okay, keep music communal thing, but also framework presenting works. Okay. So what I will say about this is when I started going to music school, I didn't really understand, because I didn't grow up like making classical music or like, you know, studying an instrument or doing that, right? And so there's a very particular way in which that happens. Like we go to the festivals and we do the thing and like we perform and like we practice a lot. Hello, violin. And that just wasn't part of how I made music growing up. Like for me, it was a communal affair. Like it was like we get around, like when we gather, we get around, and like song is often the first thing that we do, but it's always together, and it's always just a collective thing to raise our spirits. It was never about like competition or like about like, you know, oh, I really gotta, like, I'm stressed out about this thing. And so like when I entered into that system, I was like, whoa, okay, this is a whole different way to do things. I gotta figure that out. So because, but and that said, you know, I also saw the power and the beauty in putting stories on stage, you know, as an opera student, and getting to like getting to see the power of and the transformative nature of telling stories in that way and on that scale. I think it also made me curious to say, how can I get our stories up there? How can I make that happen? And so, and that'll be a long journey. You know, it's not going to happen tomorrow. This album is really just like a stepping place in a long journey of trying to make that a goal. Is to see our stories translated in that great way, because I think that's something that we've not had. I think, right? It's like every representation that we think we might, you know, that the, you know, non-Indigenous Canadian might know about Indigenous people through media, you know, up until really recently had nothing to do with Native people. You know what I'm saying? It was not written by us. It was not even acted by us. They got Italians to play us, you know? And so it was like, it was not an authentic representation of who we are. And so I think now we're moving into a generation where we are creating things for an audience. And I think that is a good thing and a bad thing. And I think I personally struggle with this quite a bit, is like how, because a lot of our songs and a lot of our stories and a lot of our ideas, like I was trying to explain sort of that, like that gender difference and how we think differently about that. It's like, those are really hard to translate in like an hour, you know? And so it's like finding ways to tell stories slowly and to really, this is a point about it as well, is like slow down the way we ingest stories as well. I think often like with the ways in which we take in media now, or we take in like, because we can, you know, because we can flip on Spotify and we have every symphony ever written available to us, of course, like, you know, we want to take it all in, you know, but I think also we lose something in that, which is to like slow things down and build something. And for me, you know, creating this record was a 5-year endeavor, from the research to the recording to the composition and all that kind of stuff. And so that takes a community, you know, that doesn't happen just with one person. And so, you know, I really relied heavily on you know, my people and the people around me to support me in doing that work. And so I guess that's what I was talking about when I talk about a communal sense of practice. And but too, I think like I always want to make sure that like I'm putting out work that is not extractive and that is not, I guess performative is an interesting word because I think, because, you know, I was talking a little bit earlier about that dearth in representation of Indigenous people, because there has been that space, like there's been kind of this chamber where nothing exists. And so when we come in and we start to speak into that void, the stories might get amplified or shifted in a way that we didn't intend, you know? And so I think we always have to be very cautious about how we share our stories and how we perform them for people outside of our community that don't speak our languages or that might not hold them with the same reverence. Because for us, like, you have to understand, like, stories for like an oral culture. So up until quite recently, many of us, like many of our Indigenous languages, had no writing system, and so everything was orally passed on. And so in these oral cultures, like storytelling is so important, you know. And it's like I think what has been a big lesson for me is to see the ways in which like mass media and institutions will shift stories to tell their own story on top of your story. Doesn't feel great. And so I guess ensuring that you try to take the performative nature out of it, I guess, because what am I really getting at here? No, I think I'll leave it there. I hope that's okay. Connor, I hope that got your question.
Yeah, thanks. That was great, and really enjoyed the concert.
Oh, thank you. I'm really glad about that. I had a lot of fun. Take care. I love your tie. Orange shirt, orange tie day.
Thank you, Jeremy. So I think we're kind of getting to the end of our time. So just want to say a huge thank you from us, both for the concert and for taking the time to speak to us and give us some of the ideas behind your work. And we're all so excited about hearing new work from you. So we're all looking forward to it.
Well, I can't wait to come in and share it with you in person. This is, to be honest, it's kind of like, it's hard as somebody who loves to, we're talking about performance, to get up on stage and share, that I'm kind of unable to do that now. And so I hope that, when all of whatever we're going through right now becomes a little more clear and things open up a little bit more, that we can share some space together and some music and all that. But until then, I wish you all of you, as well, you, Pat, just good health and stay well and take care of each other. It was such a pleasure to get to talk with you all today.
Stay safe.
Thanks. Bye.